we have for critical infrastructure. The public-private partnership, then the government and the owners and operators and vendors of information and communications technologies can get together and decide and define what's critical. And then how can we then prioritize risks and understand from both a private sector point of view and a government point of view, what's an acceptable level of risk to ensure national security, economic security, public health and safety, but also from the owner, operator, and vendor's perspective, what are those best control solutions that make sense from a business perspective, and what's the value proposition for the private sector to employ those controls in the interest of national security or public health and safety or economic competence or economic security. One of the things that we've done, a next step is to really identify and prioritize those critical functions of infrastructure. When you look at critical infrastructure, every piece of critical infrastructure, whether it's an individual physical asset or whether it's in the information and communications technology arena, most of our assets are not physical buildings, they're not dams, they're not water supplies, they're not pipelines, they're not energy producing facilities. In information technology, we have very virtual and logical assets. And one of the things we did in the United States is we took an approach where the information technology sector doesn't necessarily have physical assets that need to be protected. If something happens to Microsoft's campus in Redmond, Washington in the United States, is that an incident of national significance? Well, probably not. The functioning of infrastructure, the functioning of the economy will still continue if Microsoft campus or Dell or IBM or Cisco. But what's important is the technology Microsoft produces and the function that provides to the infrastructure. That's what's important to protect, not Microsoft's physical campus. So when we took a look in the United States at how information technology, we took a look at, instead of doing it on an asset-based approach and doing risk management from an asset, we took a look at how to do it from a function-based. So in the United States, we came up with 6 core IT sector critical functions that then led to another 30 sub-functions. Some of those 6 core functions, to give you an idea, one of them, for example, is provide domain name resolution services. So the idea that domain name resolution is a critical function that many sectors that are interdependent. If you think of domain name resolution, DNS resolution, there are so many sectors that are dependent upon DNS for that resolution. We felt that was a critical function that the IT sector provided to other sectors and provides to itself, provides to the government. So then we took a look at that function and we started to break it down into elements and sub-functions. Then we started to look at, well, what is the value chain or what is the supply chain that helps create that function? So when we look at DNS provider and the provision of DNS services on the internet, what goes into making that? And what do companies like VeriSign or other companies do when they're actually providing DNS resolution? And then we started to look at where are the intersecting interdependencies of those functions. So when one function intersects another, what are those critical interdependencies that we need to look at? This helps us then have an approach to do risk management, because now we're focused on what is the essential function to national security, or what is the essential function to economic security, and taking it by a function approach. And then another thing that's really important is that we are heavily involved in is the continuous assessment and the continuous activities of risk management. The idea that we are constantly taking those key functions, assessing risk, evaluating the consequences to the loss of those functions, and then looking for different mitigation strategies and different controls. And again, when I talk about the controls and mitigations or protective programs, it has to be, most of the owner-operators, if I'm a private sector company and I'm owning and operating some piece of critical infrastructure, I have business objectives that dictate my risk management activities for that critical infrastructure. But in many cases, my business, there may exist a gap between what the risk management and risk appetite from my business perspective is. There may be a gap that exists between that and what is the national security, economic security, and public health and safety. So you have to then bridge that gap and find controls and mitigation that will satisfy both the business objectives as well as the critical infrastructure protection objectives. And then you have to do that in a way that helps the private sector have a value proposition for doing that.